Greetings, all you gravity haters, and welcome to Undeclared Bajor, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine rewatch, Season 2. My name is Fletcher, about to say hello is Data.
What up?
Today we're going to recap, discuss, and rate Season 2, Episode 6, Melora, alternate title, Mel on Wheels.
Okay, no, that was good. Okay.
Excellent. A quick note on spoilers in case our rewatch is your first watch. Expect full spoilers through this episode, and an appropriate minimum of minor spoilers for later in the series. But we won't spoil anything too big, like when it turns out all the characters are actually Odo.
Everyone is Odo.
If you look really carefully, they set it up really... No. This episode originally aired October 31st, Halloween, 1993. I was thinking about, it feels like we've watched more than just, 10 months of TV so far, because I think the first one was in January 1993, so we're still in 1993. I think this was, the day before the European Union formed, or something like that.
Huh.
Yep, November 1st, the Maastricht Treaty takes effect, formally establishing the European Union.
For some reason, I felt like that happened a few years later than that. Interesting.
Oh, really? I feel like the European Union feels like something that's been around just forever. But what do I know? And I remember when the Euro came out, that was in 2000 or something, wasn't it?
See, I think that's more like what I was thinking, was around early 2000s sometime, so maybe that's why.
It says the name Euro was officially adopted 16th of December 1995 in Madrid.
Wow. Okay.
But the Euro was introduced to world finance markets as an accounting currency on January 1st, 1999.
Okay, so a year earlier than we were thinking, kind of, but that's close-ish.
Replacing the former European currency unit at a ratio of 1-to-1. So I guess there's a precursor. I don't know.
Huh.
This is not related to Star Trek, and we'll all get cut out. If you're listening to this, it's because I'm lazy. Anyway, this episode was written by Evan Carlos Summers, Stephen Baum, Michael Piller, and James Crocker. Story by Evan Carlos Summers. And it was directed by good old Vinrich Kolbe, the Dutch-born German immigrant who fought in Vietnam and had an affair with Kate Mulgrew. In case you don't remember all those facts about him.
Yep, I didn't remember. I'm glad that I'm back up to date.
So in this week's very special episode of Deep Space Nine, Bashir, Dax, and O'Brien are finishing getting the station up to ADA code in preparation of the arrival of a new cartographer, Ensign Melora Pazlar, who comes from a low-gravity planet and needs a wheelchair to get around. I gotta say, Deep Space Nine is a very wheelchair-unfriendly station.
Oh my gosh, yes it is.
Which I've noticed before when they've had to, run over those little, bumps in the floor that are seriously under every arch.
Yep, at every doorway or anything, the Cardassians design it so that there's a raised lip for some reason.
Yep. Because they especially hate people in wheelchairs.
Well, even without that, I feel like people would be tripping all the time. Yeah.
It's part of their elite Cardassian military training. They always have to watch where their feet are.
I don't even know, the chest pieces on those Cardassian uniforms stick out so far that I'm like, can you even see your feet most of the time?
It's all intentional. It's all it's athletes training with those masks over their face. Bashir, who has done extensive preparatory stalking, is excited to meet her. However, when she does arrive, she turns out to be a little abrasive, especially regarding the subject of her disability. Meanwhile, Quark is meeting with what I assume is a Euridian man, arranging to sell 42 undoubtedly totally authentic rings of Paltris.
Yeah, how many did that guy say? It's there's only so many of these in existence, and Quark is like, well, I have half of them or something.
Yep.
Somehow.
Sounds legit.
Yeah, the wiki says he is a Euridian, so you got that.
Oh, good. And he's selling them for the tidy sum of 199 bars of latinum.
Which is just oddly specific. Why do you not just go 200 at that point and let them, whittle you down to 199.
Yeah, maybe he's going for the 199 trick.
Oh,
obviously.
yeah, okay. No, you're right.
Suddenly, into the bar walks a bird-faced dude, whom Quark immediately recognizes. He invites Birdman in and starts nervously asking him about his business. Birdman replies, "My business is, I'm going to kill you." Now, if you would have told me at this point in the episode that lady in a wheelchair, bird-faced man, and Uridian man buying 42 rings of Paltris would all come together, I would have been like, you're crazy. Commander Sisko, Dax, and Bashir have a meeting where they discuss Melora's wish to take a runabout alone into the Gamma Quadrant. Sisko is uneasy about giving a runabout to a brand new ensign to take through the wormhole. Melora shows up and continues to be touchy about her condition and begs to be allowed to go alone, but Sisko assigns Dax to go with her. Later, Bashir visits Melora in her quarters, calls her out on her rude behavior, then asks her out for dinner. We cut back to Quark and Birdface. Quark tries to offer Birdface all kinds of the usual services, but Birdface reiterates his desire to kill Quark. So it's like, booze won't do it, ladies won't do it,
Soup.
gambling won't do it. Oh yeah, he just throws that soup.
Oh, man.
Bashir takes Melora to a Klingon restaurant where the chef tries to serve them unfresh rocked. But Melora rectifies the situation.
Yep, I like... Bashir's very presumptive. He's like, "Oh, should I go ahead and order first? I mean, I don't know if you know anything about this sort of thing." And then she just like completely shows him up by being like, "No, that's not fresh," and just speaking Klingon perfectly, which seems odd because like that Klingon guy was also speaking Klingon, and I'm like, aren't you all wearing the comm badges that would translate this? Like, isn't that the whole thing?
Yeah, I never quite understand how that works when somebody starts speaking another language, but I like how also the Klingon, it's like he does this Swedish chef maneuver where when she complains about the racht, he like grabs the whole plate and like just tosses it.
Yep.
And all the food goes flying.
It's all contaminated now. Get rid of that. But I love the acting by the chef guy because you see these different emotions pass over his face. Where first he looks like he's going to be angry, and then he like gradually goes to like, she caught me, and then he goes into like he's actually really pleased, and he's like, I love having a customer who knows what they want.
Yep. I mean, the new racht looked exactly the same as the old to me, but I don't know much about Klingon food.
It was a lighter color, and it was still wiggling more, I think was the thing.
I mean, if they actually went to the trouble of like separating the earthworms, which I assume is what the racht is, by like wiggliness, I would be really impressed.
Well, I kind of figured that there was probably only the one actual worm and the rest was fake.
That could be too. It looked like somebody went to the bait shop and got like a big cup, like one of those big styrofoam cups of worms. But what do I know? Bashir tells Melora the story of what made him want to become a doctor. So this is, I guess, we're getting some Bashir backstory.
Assuming that it's true, I kind of thought that maybe that was just like his emotional story for women about why he wanted to be a doctor.
Yeah, I should say I'm very suspicious of Bashir's motives and intentions this entire episode.
Well, and also given what he says about like they were on this planet because his dad was like a Federation diplomat there or something, and then spoiler later that is definitely not the case. That kind of also makes me doubt this story a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, it couldn't be the writers forgot.
Well,
they were deliberately planting this as a lie. But it's clear Dr. Bashir has been doing lots of research on her.
Mm-hmm. Well, which isn't creepy at all.
And I get the feeling that he's engineering everything towards a particular moment, which happens later.
Yep. Look, okay, let's be fair. Despite the fact that he is like weirdly obsessed with her before she even shows up, and her like zero gravity environment. I feel like this episode we finally get like this Bashir as ladies man thing that they seem determined to do, but in a way that is not nearly as uncomfortable and awkward as it has been every other time they've tried to do it. Like, he actually feels a little bit like, you know, I don't want to quite go so far as to say suave, but he feels like a guy that, you know, is actually intelligent and that is actually might be okay with women, as opposed to like his weird overeager creepiness from season 1.
Maybe. Or maybe he's just gotten better at hiding his creepiness.
That's entirely possible, because there is still definitely some creepy element to all of the stuff in here. But I was reading the wiki on this, and it's like part of the reason they decided to do, because originally they imagined the wheelchair character as being a male, but part of the reason that they decided to go for a female is because Siddig El Fadil kept being like, when am I going to get a girlfriend?
So yeah, the next morning, Dax shows up at Melora's quarters for their mission, but she isn't there. She finds her in a cargo bay having a I've fallen and I can't get up situation.
Yep. Because there weren't any ramps there, because Orion had to go and install ramps all over the place, but not like literally everywhere, because geez, wouldn't that be a pain?
Yep. They did set that up at the beginning of the episode.
They sure did.
It's like, I did the best I could, but I can't be putting ramps like all over the freaking place. Bashir patches Melora up and walks her home, mentioning some research he read about a medical procedure that might be able to help her. Melora invites him into her quarters, where she turns off the gravity, and then the two presumably have 0G sex, which I suspect was what Bashir wanted all along.
Yeah, that he was so obsessed with like seeing her float around. He's like, oh, I can't wait to see her float around. And then the first time she like just kind of slams the door in his face, essentially. And so yeah, but
I just imagine him like learning about this new person coming to the station, and then just immediately like into his head, it's like 0G sex, and he immediately gets to work researching and planning his strategy to get to that point, which apparently worked. Later on their mapping mission, Dax and Melora listen to Vulcan music and talk about the difficulties of having a relationship in Starfleet. Which this felt maybe a little, so maybe it didn't feel like the most feminist scene I've ever seen in Star Trek.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a scene that's like passing the Bechdel test or whatever, but as like a new officer in Starfleet, talking to a slightly more experienced, I don't know how much she knows about Dax's past lives. She doesn't seem surprised about like that when Dax refers to something that happened like hundreds of years ago, so I assume she knows. But like, it seems like a realistic sort of conversation to me, even if it's not like, you know, writing for women in the best possible way. Like this is one of her first postings, and maybe the first time she's ever been interested in a guy as the Starfleet officer. So she's like, is this a thing that's even a good idea to try? And I think that's exactly the sort of thing that she would be thinking about. And she doesn't seem to have any friends. So talking to Jadzia also makes sense.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense, but it just I forget who it was. I think it was like Gloria Steinem or something, who said, it's like, women ask me all the time how they can balance a career and a family, but I've never had a man ask me that. And also, okay, she said, this is such a minor point, but Dax said she was in Starfleet 150 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know if that tracks. I mean, I guess there was a Starfleet 150 years ago, but...
That's a fair point.
Did she say the name of that person also?
No, she just says, I think I would have to go back like 150 years or whatever, so...
I mean, she might have been in like the ancient Trill equivalent of Starfleet or something.
Now I'm looking up stuff about Dax. Apparently Dax was born on Trill in the year 2018.
Yeah, I remember we discussed that like in the first episode or something. Like, Dax was born just a few years ago.
What would be 150 years before this? Maybe that's the best way.
It would be like 22 teens or something like that.
Okay, let's look at no spoilers, but let's see if that fits. That one died in 2284. What about you? I mean, there's not that much information about a lot of the previous hosts, even by the end of the show, but that one almost certainly was not in Starfleet.
I mean, could it have been Tobin Dax?
It may. Hold on. Hold on.
He or she apparently knew about engines and stuff, so.
Tobin. That can't be right. Sorry, it says that status deceased as of 2371. That can't be when he died. So
right.
I don't. Yeah, it doesn't give any indication of any of these previous ones, whether being a Starfleet, except maybe for Curzon. But Curzon was way too recent for that.
Yeah.
Apparently, one of her hosts was in combat many times. He might have been.
Could be.
Okay. Anyway.
So Quark goes to Odo's to complain about the guy constantly trying to kill him. Or constantly threatening to kill him anyway. Odo reveals that Birdface spent 8 years in Romulan prison after Quark ratted him out regarding a hijacking of Romulan ale. Odo does not seem too concerned with the guy following Quark around going, I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you.
I mean, he says he's gonna do his job, and he calls the guy in, and he's like, hey, I can't let you kill Quark. I'm sorry. I mean, I get it. I want to kill him too, but, you know.
Melora visits Bashir in the infirmary, and Bashir reveals that he's perfected the procedure that may enable Melora to walk. She seems pleased. And then we get the scene where Odo invites Birdface to his office, where he gives him a little "don't kill anybody on my station" speech.
Yep.
But Birdface does not seem too concerned.
Yep. He's like, you can't arrest me because of how I walk. No, I'm walking out.
Odo meets with Quark and is like, yeah, that guy probably is going to kill you. Here, take this comm badge.
Which he then never uses at all.
Right. But, you know, it's good to have anyway. Although Quark brings up the good point. It's like, you know, by the time I need to use the comm badge, it's probably too late.
Which it kind of was. Although, I don't know. The guy jumps Quark in his quarters to start with later, and they have a very long conversation where he like tries to buy him off or whatever. So it really seems like he could have maybe used a comm badge at some point.
Yep. Although, you know, or at least, you know, do the old trick where you turn on your cell phone and call 911.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I guess they just hand comm badges out to whoever.
Yeah, that was a little weird, but
it's weird to me even because Odo's comm badge is like a Bajoran one, and he gives Quark a Starfleet one. Like, where'd you get that?
He must have just had it in the Lost and Found or something. People are just apparently like losing these comm badges all the time. Sometimes they like appear and disappear like on a person. Back in the infirmary, Bashir does the procedure to Melora, and she's able to lift her leg. She walks easily into ops, much to everyone's amazement. But the effect soon wears off. Bashir explains that with more treatments, the effect will become more permanent. But she can't use her zero-G remote thing anymore. Melora seems uncertain about going through with the procedure, and later Dax tells her the story of the Little Mermaid.
Yep. Which, you know, I'm glad that Dax knew that story and that it was relevant to this situation.
Yep. She didn't tell her an old Trill legend. She told her the Little Mermaid, but whatever. It fits. Although, I mean, I guess it's pretty strongly implied. Or did Bashir even say at one point that if she goes all the way through with it, she won't be able to go back to her home planet?
It's okay. So,
because that has to be the dilemma, right? Otherwise, there's literally no reason not to do it.
What he seems to indicate, or what I thought he was indicating, was that like, during the treatment, she can't be going back and forth between one and the other because then long term she might lose some fine motor skills because of her muscles haven't gotten used to the increased gravity because they keep going back to low gravity, whatever.
Yeah.
Later in the episode, she says, if I do this, I won't be able to go home again. I mean, maybe for a short visit, but not like really go home. And that's why she's like, oh, I don't know if I can. And because I remember thinking at the time, like, I don't feel like that it was the situation, but I mean, I guess maybe that's what they were trying to convey, and I just didn't get it because, I mean, she seems pretty sure of it when she says it. Yeah. So,
and Bashir never argues with her. Well, I guess it could be just all a big misunderstanding. Like, she thinks this is going to, like, make her unable to ever go home or whatever. And Bashir would be like, what? No, you can totally go home after the procedure's over. Like, you can survive in a low-gravity environment. Once your brain... I honestly don't understand what the science is supposed to be behind this procedure. Like, it doesn't make your muscles stronger. It makes, like, your brain stronger to control your muscles. Or something.
I don't know. I mean, it increases the some sort of neurotransmitter a bunch, and that somehow I don't know.
Birdman finally comes to kill Quark, but Quark bargains his way out by offering Birdman the 199 bars of latinum from his ring scam, or legitimate business deal. However, Birdman just murders the customer, steals the rings and the latinum, and hijacks Dax and Melora's runabout with Quark in tow. So Birdman, he's just, he wants it all. He wants the rings, he wants the money, and he wants to murder Quark.
Yeah, it's a little bit greedy. I mean, the Quark's like, hey, I'll give you all this money. And the guy's like, huh, I do like the sound of all that money. And then, if he would have taken the money, he could have left and everything would have been fine.
Yeah.
But he's like, no, I still want to kill Quark. And you know what? I'm going to kill this other guy, too, for no real reason, because I don't need those rings.
Right. This is where it becomes apparent that Birdface is just an unhinged psychopath.
Yeah. Quark probably did the right thing, turning him over to the Romulans.
Yeah, totally. It now makes a lot more sense. It's like, oh, geez. Like, have this crazy guy... It's like, can you assure me he's going to die in prison?
Yeah. I don't want him coming after me.
I'm surprised to hear people get out of Romulan prison.
I mean, yeah, 8 years. Apparently he carries bricks in Romulan prison, which I was like, that's a weird thing for, like, this spacefaring civilization to need its prisoners to do. But whenever we see Cardassian prison camps, they're always, like, breaking rocks for some reason. So whatever.
Just putting rocks into baskets and carrying them off somewhere. Yeah. These could just be, like, punishment bricks that they just have to carry back and forth. Who knows?
Punishment bricks. I like that.
So Birdface shoots Melora just to show Cisco he's serious and escapes through the wormhole. Luckily, Melora is still alive. She turns off the gravity and tackles Birdman, putting an end to the situation. Which I think we're supposed to get out of this, that being able to function in zero gravity is her superpower or something.
I mean, yeah, I guess she's used to it and no one else is used to it, so...
yeah. She, like, tackles Birdface Man and knocks his head against the windshield or whatever.
Yep.
And that's that. Melora and Bashir have one final date at the Klingon restaurant, where she tells him her decision not to go through with the procedure. The Klingon chef tries serenading them with Klingon music, but moves on when he realizes he's not going to get a tip. The end.
So, there's lots of interesting stuff in, like, the behind this episode thing.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, you noted at the beginning all the different writers.
Yeah, even when I was first watching that episode, I saw this, like, screen filled with tons of writers' names come up. I was like, oh, that's a good sign.
Yeah, so apparently, like, they had this idea for the episode. An episode with, like, somebody from a low gravity environment. And in fact, originally, the idea was that the science officer was going to be this character from a low gravity environment.
Okay. Just like the main character of the show, science officer?
Like, it eventually got replaced with Jadzia. That character was going to be this low gravity person. But they realized that, like, trying to regularly do the low gravity effect would be, like, expensive. So
that super realistic looking low gravity effect where they clearly weren't just on a harness with wires.
Exactly, yes. So they're like, yeah, we can't afford to do that all the time. So they use Dax instead, whose, I guess, biggest cost is spot application.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, oh, well, they had this wheelchair officer idea up on like the board for the first season. Like, we'll do this at some point. And so they get this guy, the Summers, Evan Carlos Summers, who's one of those people on that writer's list.
Uh-huh. And he's the story by credit also.
Yeah. So he is actually a person in a wheelchair. So he was like, I think I can bring some like pathos and some real, reality, some empathy to this character because I understand like issues that she would be dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, okay, you go write this episode. We'll let you take a shot at this. So he breaks the story down, and he says that one of his biggest influences was the episode of Next Generation, Ethics, where Worf gets like spinal damage and wants to kill himself.
Right.
And he's like, this is not a message that we should ever be sending. That like, once you're disabled, you're completely worthless and should just kill yourself.
Uh-huh.
So he wanted to fight against that sort of portrayal. And he thought that was just like the worst episode ever. So he's like, I want to write this where, this is a strong character who has accepted who they are and doesn't need to change.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to do that was to have Bashir find this cure, and the character turns it down and says, no, I'm okay the way I am.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that was kind of the genesis for it. And then he wrote the first draft. He created the story, which I guess why he gets the story by.
Mm.
And it was not well received. It did not go over well at all. And his excuse is, okay, so I'd previously committed to another project that started 2 weeks before that, and I needed another week for that. So I thought that since I'd turned out battle lines in a week, so I guess he wrote battle lines,
mm-hmm.
in a week and a half, I could do the same thing for Melora. That was not the best decision I ever made. And so Ira Stephen Bear calls him. It's like, yeah, we don't like the script, and we're not even gonna like rewrite it. We're just. But then one of the other guys on staff, Stephen Baum, was like, hey, no, here, let me take a shot at it. So he does another version, I guess also not super popular, which is when Michael Piller and James Crocker come in to do a third version of the script.
Okay.
And Michael Piller is quoted as being like the original story that was fleshed out was flawed and very difficult to write. So instead of sticking to like the basic concept, I like did this whole other thing basically. But apparently, I mean, despite him saying that, the original guy Summers says that actually he stayed pretty true to my story in the rewrite. So, and then there's a list of changes made, and from the original draft, and there's not really a lot of big changes. I mean, it's stuff like the climactic scene with Fish Guy or whatever was going to take place in a cargo bay instead of a runabout. And the most interesting one to me was that guy originally was going to kill Quark by showing up in his quarters, and he was a lot more like the whole plot had a lot more to it, where he's like psychologically messing with Quark.
Uh-huh.
And then when he shows up to kill him, he's going to do it by using one of the SETI eels from Wrath of Khan that goes into your ear.
Oh.
Except this variety doesn't cause the mind control vulnerability. I guess instead it would just kill you torturously. So
at that point, couldn't you just like say it was something else?
Right? Yeah. But yeah, so he was like, I thought that it was like a fitting, torturous end for someone who'd caused you 8 years of suffering. And so that original writer, Summers, is like, in the final version, they just had the guy strangle him, and it wasn't really that interesting. There's a lot of stuff in here that's just him commenting on like how he doesn't like the changes that they made to his version.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can tell what they were going for with the I don't really need to be fixed stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy about the execution or just the episode as a whole. But to be fair to Evan Carlos Summers, I did understand the point he was trying to make.
Well, and one of the things that he says about the version that airs is that he feels like they took his original stuff, which had his perspective on stuff as a person who is in a wheelchair.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, look, I resist the idea that a disabled person can't integrate into the environment. And
Sure.
I like the idea that the regulars, for a brief moment, would be the problem by misinterpreting her needs and falling over themselves to help. But he feels like that the final version, they took a lot of the like actual like real stuff that he put in and just changed it into like stereotypical stuff. And so he says in this version, the regulars come out looking like dumb and awkward. And that was not the way I wrote it. But
I mean, that must be kind of what it seems like a lot of times, though, when you're in that situation. Is all these people trying to be helpful and just, like, being in your way constantly with their attempting to help.
Yeah. But one of my favorite parts of his complaining is that the scene where Melora gets shot and Bashir sees it. And he's like, I had Bashir scream, no! Because he's in love with this woman. And he's just had zero gravity sex with this woman. And it was unforgettable. It wasn't just another one-nighter with a Bajoran. I was like, oh, geez, okay, well, that's... And so it's like he should have like cried out in rage and pain when he saw her die. But he didn't do that. It was just like, yeah, whatever. And then when he discovers she's alive, he's like, I don't feel like there was any emotion there, where he's like relieved that she's alive.
Yeah, I did not get the impression Bashir was in love with her.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's more of his like womanizing, basically. Like he's like, I've never had zero gravity sex before. Got to get me some of that.
Yeah, that definitely was the vibe I was getting. At best, they were a friendly hookup friendship.
I don't think that's how she was taking it. She thinking about like, oh man, should we have a relationship?
Right. But, well, yeah, obviously.
But yeah, and
Dax should have warned her off of that, frankly, right away. He's like, "Oh, are you talking about Bashir?"
Yeah, it's like, dude, you have no idea. Bashir, you don't know. It's like a whole.
Bashir hit on me this morning. Like, I don't think you should put all your eggs in that basket.
But yeah, I don't know. It's a Bashir episode in a lot in a lot of ways, and I think he's better in it than we have seen him in a lot of things. But yeah, he's still a little bit Bashir-y.
That is my one note that I took is, wow, another Bashir episode. I think it doesn't matter because I found this episode incredibly boring. Which I know I was talking about last time, how I like my Star Trek boring. This is not what I was talking about. Because I think 2 or 3 times this episode, I had to pause and get up and do something else just to wake myself up from the what felt like an eternal episode of nothing happening.
Well, there's not really any stakes in this episode, unless you count like Quark's life as stakes, which I don't particularly, but
unless you actually think this Birdface guy is a real threat.
Yeah. And
which he becomes, I guess, kind of at the end when he just starts indiscriminately shooting everybody.
It's true. Like, yeah, he's just going to shoot Jadzia and stuff. Like, at the end, you're like, oh, geez. But yeah, until then, it's like, the main story is just, I mean, the episode is titled Melora, and it's about this person who we know is going to be on the station for all of 5 minutes. Yeah, and then is going to leave again. And so we find out how, like, not handicap accessible the station is, which, I mean, I could have told you that already. Yeah. But I didn't know that, like, their anti-gravs don't work for some reason here, which is...
Sure.
That must make moving things way harder, because every time on, like, the Enterprise we see the moving stuff, they, like, load things onto an anti-gravity hand-dolly thingy, and they move them around. Mm-hmm. So, that's unfortunate. But yeah, it's just... You got to get invested in this character really fast, and you have to care about what she's going through, knowing that, like, at the end of the day, she's going to not be there in the next episode. So
yeah. And like that's a possible thing to do. That's happened on Star Trek before. Where like a guest star showed up. I mean,
you got like Tosk.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like that romance between Tosk and O'Brien was legendary. Yeah, but it's totally possible for have a character show up, have one of our main characters become emotionally invested in that character, and have that kind of communicated to us, the audience.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually probably one of the most popular, like, general stories of, like, the Next Generation, where
Yeah, definitely.
somebody shows up, one of the characters falls in love with them, but of course here, as we were talking about, it's like, you don't get the impression that Bashir cares all that much. And there's an added awkwardness that I meant to note, but I didn't before, where you have that scene where he shows up to ask her out, and he's like, "Oh, I'm no longer your doctor because I'm going to ask you out." And then he's the only doctor she sees for anything the entire rest of the episode.
Yeah. And my thinking, because I don't think she's an unlikable character. But it's like you said, the main problem is I never felt like Bashir really cared that much about her. And maybe that's just because of what we've seen so far of Bashir over the series. Maybe it's just the writing or the performance. I don't know. But
now, I got to give him that I think it's a really good scene when he shows up to ask her out, and he has that discussion where he talks about how, like, she's always just on the attack, and she's like, "Well, I don't mean to," and he's like, "No, clearly you do mean to." Right. And like, you get the impression that in that scene that it's like, oh, this guy actually does kind of know people, and he takes an approach with this woman that actually works and, like, kind of gets through these walls that she's putting up and makes her look at her own situation differently. You're like, wow, Bashir has, like, empathy and like good points here. And then it's like, oh, but he's actually just trying to get, like, sleep with her. So
right. He has these skills, but only really goes through the effort to use them to get into women's pants. But like, you know, when he has, like, Quark in his infirmary who's just been assaulted by the Circle or whatever and branded in the brain lobe or whatever, then his empathy is totally gone. He's just like, shut the F up.
You're not an attractive woman. Get out of my infirmary. Yeah. So, you know, I feel like we're evolving his character gradually here, and I like the improvements that we're making this season, even if, you know, we haven't come all the way.
True, I guess.
And I don't particularly like Melora, and it might be mostly because, you know, she is that, like, on the attack all the time.
Yeah.
And I said I like the scene where he, like, kind of gets her to reconsider her stance, which I do. I think that's a really good scene. But she also seems to, like, turn on a dime after that point. And it's like, oh, now I'm a completely new character.
Yeah, that was a little weird when she was just suddenly, like, all in on Bashir.
Yeah, and she's like, I'm going to be friends with Jadzia now, even though I was, like, super offensive yesterday and didn't want her on my mission. But now I'm going to ask her for some relationship advice. And it's also, like, her whole interaction with Cisco, like, the one time that we get to see, I was like, okay, this is, like, he's like, oh, I do have meetings with my senior staff that I don't invite ensigns to, just FYI. And she's like, really offensive to the commander of the station?
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know that you should be able to get away with that. I mean, she tries to, like, you know, explain it away. Like, oh, I'm just used to people leaving me out because of my disability and, like, talking about me when I'm not there. And he's like, okay, like, but that's
it's like, no one's trying to do that. Like, we're all, like, on your side.
But so yeah, she's kind of an upsetting character that just instantly changes into what also seems like a very naive character when, you know, asking for the relationship advice and then, like, realizing after she started this medical procedure, like, the real ramifications of it, which I guess she didn't
ramifications of it,
which she didn't think through at all before starting. So, and I mean, and there's some implication in when the guy's talking about why he wrote it the way he did. There's, like, an implication in there that maybe she's just doing it because she's, like, fallen for Bashir. So she's like, oh, well, I mean, he wouldn't want to do something that wasn't right for me, right? So I should listen to him and I should do it because that's what he wants. So there's a lot of, I don't love her character. And once again, I don't ever feel like there's real stakes for her character here. And it's like, usually when you have one of these characters show up that somebody gets really interested in, there's, like, a serious whatever that comes up. Like that time that Riker falls in love with the person from the planet that they're not allowed to have genders or whatever, right? So it's like this person may be executed or like brainwashed or whatever for what they're doing. Or, Loaxana shows up in love with the guy who's going to be killed by his species because he's too old now. Or,
Right.
There's some sort of stakes. And for her, it's like, this station is uncomfortable for me for a short period of time before I move on to my next temporary assignment.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I kind of understood what they were trying to go for with her being all defensive and everything.
Yeah.
But you're right. They just, once they were done with that aspect of the story, they just totally dropped it. It's like once Bashir got into her pants, that like loosened her up and she let her hair down and she was a nice person from then on.
Also, there's a translation here of the Klingon dialogue with the in the restaurant, if you would like that.
Okay, what does it say?
So she says, "You call this live?" And then he says, "What's your problem, lady?" And she says, "This slop you call food is the problem." And he says, "If you don't like it, then don't eat it." And she says, "I want to see the blood running through the veins." And that's when he's like, I like a customer who knows what she wants.
Nice. For some reason, I had subtitles on during that scene when I was watching it.
Yeah.
And it was like all the Klingon was like, it didn't just say like speaking Klingon, like every single Klingon word was written out.
Oh, nice. That's some dedication to the subtitling.
Yep. So I guess, I don't know how they make subtitles. I assume someone gives them a copy of the script or something as a guide, and whoever made the subtitles just used that. Or else they just listened really closely.
It's weird because I feel like different... I'm sure there's some sort of standard process, but I feel like different things that I have watched with subtitles must handle it differently, because there's some stuff like that where it's like, this looks like they had the script and they were transcribing it. Whereas there's other things that I watch with subtitles where I'm like, clearly someone was listening and typing and they didn't even pay that much attention because that word is clearly wrong and this other word is clearly wrong, Yeah.
Like characters' names are just spelled wrong all the time. And
I was watching with the kids, like, Encanto. Sure. We were watching, and we had the subtitles on because sometimes it's hard to hear stuff with kids. But anyway, and it's like they're doing one of the songs and I'm watching the subtitles and I'm like, well, that's not the line. Like, I get why you think the line sounds like that, but that's not the line because it doesn't make any sense. And then, like, this was on Disney Plus. And then, like, 2 months later, we watched the same one and they had fixed that. And I was like, oh, somebody else, like, noticed and complained about this.
Yeah.
I feel vindicated now.
Have you ever turned on the narration for the visually impaired or whatever?
No.
Which a lot of original series, especially on streaming services, seem to be doing that now.
Yeah. I've accidentally turned it on, but not like intentionally.
I've listened to it sometimes. It's kind of entertaining because it'll be like, a man in a pink shirt walks into the room. Pink shirt man points. And it's kind of weird, like, they try to be very careful not to reveal more information than the show's actually revealing. But also, it's really weird the details they focus on. It's like, a man walks into the room. He is very muscular. And that has nothing to do with the character. It's just they've decided to describe the man, the actor, as muscular.
Somebody's just like, hey, this guy's pretty sexy. I'm going to put that in there. That's important information to have.
Or it's like sometimes when it's like we've been with the character for a while, but there's kind of a lull in the action where they kind of don't have to describe very much. So they take this opportunity to suddenly, like, in detail describe the main character or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, we've been like the whole episode with this person, and it's like, she is thin with red hair and medium height and all this other stuff. So it's pretty interesting. I kind of wonder what goes into making those.
See, in my mind, that kind of thing, like, to do it justice, like, that would have to be one of the first things that you're putting in there. But, you obviously can't do that if you don't have a big blank spot, right?
Yeah.
So in my mind, to make those the best, you would have to like pause, and it's like pausing while I describe the scene, and then like they describe everything, and then it's like, okay, playing again.
Yeah. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think the audio track can override.
That wouldn't work.
Where it's like, okay, there's a scene coming up where there's a lot of detailed stuff I have to explain to you, so I'm going to start right now. Just understand in this scene, the two people are fighting. Okay, anyway. But in a little bit, this is what's going to happen.
Okay, I have one more thing that I have about this episode that I wanted to mention is, like, she gets shot, Melora, in the thing, right?
Yeah.
And doesn't die. And then at the end, it's like, why didn't that shot kill me? And Bashir's
yeah.
like, I don't know. I mean, maybe reasons. Who knows, really?
Yeah, it was like something about the neural whatever therapy strengthened her against the phaser shot or something. It was totally unnecessary. They could have just said his phaser wasn't really on kill or something.
He forgot to flip the switch, you know.
It's like that guy that Quark was scamming with the rings. He didn't die either. So that would have been a nice, because I felt that I was a little shocked when that guy got killed.
Yeah, that poor guy. Like, what did he ever do to anybody? I do like when the deal goes wrong, he's like, they warned me about you, Quark. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, that they probably should have. So
yeah.
But this time, it's really not Quark's fault, except for the fact that he brought a guy that he knew was unstable and greedy and stuff to this deal.
Right. Of course, he was, bargaining for his life at that point. So
it's true.
You can't super blame him. Anyway, you ready for ratings?
Yeah. Rankings? Yeah, we can do some ratings.
So how would you rank this episode?
Yeah, this one's a tough one for me. I don't like it.
Uh-huh.
But it's one of those, like, it's kind of like the last episode we did where I was like, I feel like there's lots of good stuff here, but I just don't like it.
Uh-huh, right.
And this one is like that, but less good stuff. So it's like, there's some good stuff here, but I also don't like it. And I don't know that my emotional I don't like this episode is related necessarily to like the good and bad qualities that we've talked about. It's just like, sure. I don't like her. I don't like what's happening. I don't like it. And so I think this may be a lieutenant junior grade for me.
Okay. That's pretty fair. I'm going to be cruel and just give it an ensign.
I considered it, but
because I mean, like you said, there's some stuff in there, but it was just so boring. And just while I was watching it, I just kept having this feeling in my mind that I'd never want to watch this episode again. So I think from an objective standpoint, it probably doesn't deserve to be that low.
Yeah.
But what was the season 1 episode I gave Ensign? I don't even remember. But yeah, like you said, sometimes it just comes down to your emotional relationship with the episode. I feel like a lot of people will probably have a similar one to mine and yours.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was interesting to me that we were both on the same page about that, where it was just like, because that wasn't the case last time. Last time I was just like, I don't like this episode, and you're like, I like this episode. So
yeah, I mean, it's just like right from the beginning when I saw those 4 writers, I was like, this is never a good sign. And it turned out to be true. I want to look up the IMDb rating on this one real fast to see if my hunch is correct. Melora has a 6.4. Maybe a little higher than I would have expected.
I was about to say that's probably slightly higher than I would have thought, but
it's matched with If Wishes Were Horses.
Interesting. Okay.
Better than the Storyteller. Storyteller was my one ensign from last season. It is pretty low for a Deep Space Nine episode. There's not very many that are that low. I wonder if there's people who just go through and rate every episode 10 because it's a Deep Space Nine episode or something, and that skews the ratings for all the episodes. Because it's like, how can the Storyteller be a 6.0? I don't understand.
That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but
yeah. Maybe some people really like that episode. I'm
That
pretty sure
those people are wrong.
I'm pretty sure we both gave the storyteller an ensign.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, that may have even been like bottom 2 or 3 for both of us in that season.
Yeah, I think that got our overall bottom
Yeah.
score. If you want to know, go watch or listen to the episode, the season 1 wrap up, where you can hear us go into detail about the ratings versus IMDb. Anyway, we spent way longer talking about that episode than I expected us to. But you ready to wrap it up?
Yeah.
Okay. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Be sure to check out the description where I occasionally put links to interesting things. Happy New Year, because I believe this is going out on the 2nd of the January.
Of the January, sure.
And don't forget, we're at 2 a week now. So there will be another episode this week on Friday. Don't just wait until next Monday.
Or, you can wait until next Monday and watch them both. That's okay, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, eventually watch it, but know that it is coming out twice a week. Anyway, I'm Fletcher. About to say goodbye is Data.
See ya.
And remember, every once in a while, declare peace. It confuses the hell out of your enemies. Okay, the end.